out, the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were anticipating. When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. Remember, because they were earnestly praying. So Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant girl named Rhoda came up to the door and answered. And when she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed. She ran back without opening it and exclaimed, "Peter is at the door." So she tells the church that's earnestly praying, Peter's at the door. And they say to her, "You're out of your mind." But when she kept insisting it was so, they said, "It must be his angel." But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and they saw him, they were astonished. To which we would need to ask, what did they expect? Peter motioned with his hands for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. "Tell James and the brothers about this," he said. And then he left for another place, and in the morning there was no small commotion with those soldiers as to what had become of Peter. And after Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed. Okay, so there we see God's mighty hand of deliverance over Peter. I mean, he's trapped with 16 guards, and God totally delivers him. And I just told you the story of Nancy and Jeff to just say, God totally is in the deliverance business still to this day. So when you're in a jam, just immediately start reaching for the mighty hand of the Lord, because that's the best place you can be in. So we're going to close up tonight by reading the last little verses. I know everybody's getting tired. It says, "Then Herod went from Judea to Caesarea." We're back at where? Caesarea, where we started, right? Caesarea, we were down at Joppa with Peter. Peter came to Caesarea. We've been down in Jerusalem. We're back at Caesarea. And he had been quarreling with some people of Tyre and Sidon, another country. And now they came together and sought an audience with him. Having secured the support of Blastus, a trusted personal servant of the king, they asked for peace, because they depended on the king's country for their food supply. So this was their Treaty of Versailles moment. Like, they were coming together, these different nations, to make a peace treaty. And that was the purpose of Herod going up to that place that I told you that I've been to, where he had a castle or a palace built on Caesarea. So on the appointed day, Herod was wearing his royal robes, the day that the peace treaty was to be signed, okay? And he sat on his throne, and he delivered a public address, a speech to the people. And they shouted, "This is the voice of a God and not a man." And immediately, because Herod did not give praise to God, an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms and died. Yeah, pretty bad. So, here we are back at Caesarea, but this time with a different man. We started out with Cornelius. Cornelius was a humble man who was humbly seeking God, and God sent his message to him. Miss Anne Marie's not here tonight, but she and I are reading through the Bible, and as you read through the Bible, you read about the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah, and how God came to them through his prophets, and he would send a message of judgment out. And they had two options. They could either oppose the prophet and his word, or they could humble themselves and fear the Lord. And you see throughout the pages of the Old Testament several people who were just awful kings, bad kings, like Ahab is who I'm thinking about. I don't know if you know King Ahab in the Bible, but King Ahab was terrible, terrible, terrible. But at one point, God sends his prophet to Ahab, and he gives him a word, and he says, "You better stop what you're doing, or else the Lord's going to wipe out your entire family while you're alive." And Ahab really takes that to heart, and he humbles himself, and he is very distraught over it, and he fears the Lord. And so God kind of pulls back his wrath, and he spares Ahab's family during the life of Ahab. But occasionally, when we see God send out judgment, either those two things happen. Either God gets a response of hostility, where someone is just mad that God has said something to them, or he gets a response of humility and they fear God. And God will relent when he sees humility. Herod's pride and arrogance against the Lord became his undoing. The Bible teaches in James chapter 4 that God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. God opposed the pride of Peter. Remember? He opposed the pride of Peter by sending him to Cornelius, right? But he gave grace to Cornelius because he was humble. And he humbly sought God in truth, right? And God opposed the pride of Herod. And he gave grace to his church who were earnestly seeking him. He gave grace to Peter. And he gave his deliverance to Peter also. And that's just a really, really good principle to write down and kind of keep in the back of your mind, that God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. It's better to be found in a place of humility than a place of pride. And then at the very end, last two verses for tonight. But the word of God continued to increase and to spread,